Welcome to Heartfelt Awakening Radio. I am your host, Denny Van. We are continuing our transformational journeys to spirit. You've been in our group pretty much since the beginning.
I have? Oh, okay.
I think so, yeah. I don't want to get back on Facebook, but I kind of looked. I think you've been a member since 2019. I think we started in 2018, but I could double check that. But I loved your response to the post, and I think that's what we wanted to really expand on, your experience, because Heartfelt Awakening Radio is about transformational journeys to spirit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And you being on this journey and what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
And you saying that it's not easy to put this into words, but I went through and experienced schizophrenia in a much more different and interesting manner. So that right there, it's like, I want to know this story. I want to know your experience with what you've gone through. How old were you when you started this journey?
I was 29 years old. And for a long time, I was in the mental health field under the diagnosis of depression and ADHD. So I had been seeing doctors and therapists and things like that and on certain medications for some time. But it wasn't until I reached the age of 29, and it was 1999 where I had my awakening experience, transformation, whatever terminology we use to psychosis, even, or the Kundalini awakening. So that's when I was hit with that, if you will.
Yeah. So at 29 years old, and you're experiencing what now they labeled schizophrenia. And you mentioned that it's different and interesting. What do you mean by that?
It's different and interesting that how I framed it, it's actually a metaphorical experience that transforms you from one perspective of reality to a wholly different perspective. And it happening right in the midst of an experience. So how I try to imagine it is using the metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly going through that cocoon phase. It's like the caterpillar within its own self has transformed its outer body that becomes a cocoon. And in that cocoon is where it's physically changing. It is going through a metamorphosis that it's called. And within that, all the physical features of it is changing. And then at a certain point in time, it evolves into the caterpillar. I believe we go through the same thing as schizophrenics, to where we are inside our own cocoon, if you will, in our mind, and everything is changing. Our perception of the world, the way we hear things, the way we see things, the brain is undergoing incomplete. It's undergoing a change, and you could actually see this change happening in an MRI, and doctors have used that to say that is the indication of the diagnosis of schizophrenia or the disease itself. It's that physical change that they see that goes from a normal MRI image to a schizophrenic image. But how I view that is the evidence of that change right there, happening right in internally within us, where the perspective of who we are, and I framed it as we're being human, going from human caterpillars to human butterfly, to where that perspective is being changed, that awareness is being changed.
Shifting. Yes. going through a shifting metamorphosis,
right,
transformation.
and it's happening right inside the human body. But the human body of a schizophrenic does not know what it's going through. So it's going to listen, the person is going to listen to the outside world and believe that they're having an illness. You're sick. Something is wrong with you. You need medication. You know, all of that. But for me, it's been interesting to say, oh, hey, it's not an illness. This is not an illness. This is a complete transformation of somebody's perspective, awareness, to where you see yourself now. For me, I see myself now as that caterpillar that can see things from a different perspective and say where I was in my awareness, you know, back when I was 29 compared to my age right now where I'm 50. And I'm like, nothing in my physical body has changed. It's just that my awareness and my perception is changed about all it. So it's like I have that butterfly awareness, if you will, to where I see things from a different perspective, and I can see others who are going through the same thing that I've gone through to say, oh, I know where they are. I understand what they're going through. But they have to go through that experience for themselves, just like any other butterfly have to go through that metamorphosis for themselves.
You're right, because I know if you see a cocoon trying to break out of the cocoon, it's become a butterfly. If you help it along, it won't be able to fly.
Exactly.
So this is really important. So as someone who is looking out, experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia and looking out of themselves for help, you're saying go inside and be in this cocoon and be inside, that it's okay. And so everything physically changed through the brain being completely rearranged. So you mentioned that your sight and the new way of seeing things is called delusion. I'd like to talk more about that. Your sight and the new way of seeing things is called delusion. Can you talk more about that?
Well, when that happens, it's like you imagine things that are in your perception. You see images that other people don't see. You see wordings being rearranged and having different meanings. You see things. You see things that feel like
messages and number patterns, right? You'll notice like all of these patterns, and you'll notice those things.
And then you go around trying to explain them to family, friends, and loved ones, and they're like, "What in the world are you talking about?" You know, you're just these things. No, I don't see what you see, but those things are happening as a part of the transformation that is happening within the human cocoon, you know, being that person.
And you talk about your hearing, and the different ways of producing sound is now referred to as hallucinations.
Hallucinations, yes, because by definition, that's what hallucinations mean. You're hearing things. So you pick up vibrations in the ether in terms of what's coming from the TV, what's coming from the radio, what's actually even coming from somebody's voice, is then changed and transformed in a subtle way that is trying to help you become the butterfly you're meant to be. And you have to have a great deal of discernment to be able to distinguish between what is helping you and what is going to hurt you. And a lot of people, a lot of schizophrenics, and a lot of people who are going through this, you know, they can't make that discernment very well. And hence, you know, the paranoia, they don't know who to trust. You know, the FBI, the CIA, all these three-letter agencies are out to get them. And and they feel that people are trying to kill them. And what's being killed, quote unquote, is the caterpillar, form or perspective that it had about the perception of the world, into growing into this new perception of understanding itself, the human person, the human body, and it's the life that it's having in the moment that we call life.
Very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah. So in talking with people, they'll disclose to me, well, I hear this person. It could be grandma, it could be Albert Einstein, it could be Carl Jung, it doesn't matter. I hear this person and I'm afraid to share that with anyone. So that hallucinations and hearing those things, what would you tell someone who is going through and experiencing that part of the process?
Wow. Yeah, that part of the process is very interesting, very tricky, because they are hearing, voices from afar to some extent. And that goes back to what I was explaining about discernment. So you have to be able to discern which one of those voices are helpful versus harmful. And for myself, I've placed the voices, if you will, I've placed the voices to what I would describe as, this is strange, but a lot of people don't believe me when I try to explain it to them, and it's hard. But I put the voices with the earth having the ability to communicate, and having this ability to communicate in a way where it's almost like how a dog would try to communicate with its owner. The dog don't have the verbal cues, the verbal traits to be able to say directly the words that we're sharing now, same as the earth, but it does have the ability to communicate. And it's going to use whatever means it think it can use to, so you can hear and realize, hey, I'm talking to you. Yes, you, I'm specifically talking to you. You know what I mean? No, don't try to, think that you're losing your mind or whatever. I'm speaking directly to you. I'm trying to get your attention. I'm trying to let you understand what's happening here so you can help me. Because you and I are in this situation together, whether you think we're separate or not. And I need your help. And the people are looking like, who's talking to me? Where's this voices coming from? You see? So they associated with Jesus or Carl Jung, or God is talking to them, or even the devil, but somebody's there in that moment communicating with them. And so that, that discernment again is tricky.
It is very tricky, and discernment is so powerful, and having support is probably vital. And you mentioned that your state of the world as a human caterpillar is being reconstructed, and that's called psychosis.
Yes. And again, those terms are necessary and needed now, in a sense, to where if you're going to frame this experience as an illness, then you frame it that way to get support to some extent. So, and also it identifies the experience happening. And so, but it's what you associate with the word. So it's all a matter of languaging. It's a matter of languaging to where if you can transform those words, like how you doing now in your program, by saying when a person is going through a psychotic experience or a kind of a psychotic break, those breaks in that experience is more of an awakening. But how do you accept that term? How do you understand that term? How do you relate to that term to where it's healthier, as opposed to the doctor going to you and said, oh, well, you're schizophrenic, you're having psychosis, here are these drugs and these medication. They might be experimental, that's okay. And we've had them around for generations, and we've used hundreds and thousands of different variations of these medications. But hey, we're going to focus on what might be work and be magical for you. So,
and that's key for you, because every person going through this is having their own experience it. And you know, you share so much in the group. Thank you for sharing in the group. I really appreciate it, because I'm going off what you wrote in one of the posts here, and you wrote, those witnessing and studying the metamorphoses of your experience are called psychologists. How your brain is being changed is viewed through the eyes of psychology as caterpillars themselves. So I'd love for you to expand more on this, because this is fantastic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. And again, the wording of this has been a struggle for me, but that's how I see it and understand it, and for myself, and how I see it and understand it for others. It's sort of like, you know, caterpillars trying to explain to other caterpillars, you know,
you don't want that cocoon thing. That's psychosis. We got to do everything to prevent that cocoon thing.
And you know, I got to tell you, Daddy, there was an image. I don't know if you saw the image that I mean that actually triggered this idea for me to discuss this. It was an image or a meme, or I don't know what we call it on Facebook, but a picture where a caterpillar and a butterfly is sitting at a table, and the caterpillar then the caterpillar reference to the butterfly, oh, you've changed. And so the butterfly responded and said, we're supposed to. And that was powerful to me, you know, because it was like, wow.
Aha moment. Yeah.
Yes.
We're supposed to. Yes.
You know, and but it leaves the caterpillar stumped to say, wait, what are you talking about? We're supposed to change, but he hasn't gotten there to that point. You know what I mean? He's still at that caterpillar stage. So I see psychologists and people in this profession in that frame of mind, to where, oh, that's why they can never get us, because they're not at that caterpillar stage. You know what I mean? I mean, they're not at that butterfly stage. They still in that caterpillar frame of mind. And
yes, they are caterpillars themselves. And you say they can only guess and assess what you are experiencing, because by their standard of measurement, you shouldn't have the ability to change into something new. Yeah. Growth is complete as an adult, or is it? So we've been lied to.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
Definitely, yes. And again, how do you make the distinction of who's telling the truth and who's telling a lie, when these are professionals and doctors, and they're supposed to know what they're talking about? Yes. So,
they are supposed to know what they're talking about. Yes. So when you talk about, but here you are doing exactly that, doing so right before the very eyes of those who love and care for you. So you go on to about, you know, as a newly formed butterfly tries to grow and extend its metaphorical wings and climb out of the cocoon of its own making, there are others describing that experience as mental illness or psychiatric disorder.
But yeah, you know, it's like that. And it's one where it's quite interesting to see the different perspective, you know what I mean? And that's what the awakening is all about. It's all about the different perspective. But then whose perspective? See, that's what's been the fight all along between, you know, the professionals and the client themselves. It's like, whose perspective has it right on this? You know, the professionals, you know, say that, and the family members who support them say, no, our perception of this situation is correct. You're not supposed to be changing and transforming in anything. And then the person was like, yeah, I'm not supposed to be changing and transforming anything, but yet I can't help it.
Yes.
It's happening. And that, that takes me back to what I was mentioning earlier about the earth trying to, communicate with us to say it's time to transform. And I write about this in my book, Schizophrenia, when mind, body, and spirit goes to war. And I use this butterfly metaphor to speak on that explanation. And so, that was pretty powerful for me. And a lot of this, it's sort of like, for me, it's a revelation, to the point where it's an aha moment. And I was like, that makes me okay with being a schizophrenic, because I understand it in the sense that, even the word schizophrenia and schizophrenic, I mean, by definition, schizophrenia means split mind. So you've split away from a previous understanding of yourself as a caterpillar to a new understanding of yourself. If you can reach there, if you can get there safely, to where you're that human butterfly. But as society, the caterpillars among us are trying to keep us caterpillars, trying to keep us into our cocoons, trying to say, I'm not sure what's going on with you, but you're not supposed to be able to, have these abilities, these psychic abilities, these, what else do they call them? Telepathy, and, these sort of sixth sense type abilities. And those things do happen. That is part of transformation. That is part of when you're going from that caterpillar to that butterfly. These things are part of that transformation where you do have those abilities. But again, those things that, the human understanding of those frame them as an illness, as a disease, as something wrong with the brain. And if we get the right combination of medication, we'll make that all go away. And, sometimes it does. I'm not going to knock the medication, because I still, rely on my medication to keep me stable and from going too far to the right of the butterfly. So,
keeping that balance. Yeah.
Because I'm still grounded. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you said, I only went through an incomplete metamorphosis where nothing visible has changed on the outside. However, on the inside, I came through that experience awakened to a different perspective and new reality of being a human insect. Wow. Wow, freaking amazing. You did say all of that.
I love it. Wow. Yeah, so, with that, again, using the butterfly is a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Using that, and what part of my research in doing this is I had to look into the life cycle of a butterfly, because, and when I did that, I Googled it. I said I wanted to search and find out what the life cycle of a butterfly was all about, and understand the different, wording in the language here between what is a complete metamorphosis versus what is incomplete. And what I learned is a complete metamorphosis is where you completely change physically into something completely different. For example, a toad, not a toad. What do you call those baby ones? Those
tadpoles.
Tadpoles. Yes. Tadpoles. They undergo a complete metamorphosis because they change from one.
No legs, 2 legs. Yeah.
Exactly. And but an incomplete metamorphosis is where you change, but not to where you're a completely different variation of yourself. You know what I mean? And I suspect that human beings have that ability, and that is visible in schizophrenia, and schizoaffective, and the other diagnosis that comes from anxiety, depression, bipolar, and the rest is sort of part of that initial transformation from, complete to incomplete and things like that. So for me, that was distinction that I was fascinated about. I loved it. I was like, oh my God, that made so much sense. So I then started saying to myself, aha, we are simply human butterflies and human, things like that, to where, oh, we're not really human beings. Well, you could say we're human beings, but we're human beings being butterflies. We're different variations of them. And the butterflies themselves, to me, was symbolic of being able to visually see us, quote unquote, in insect form, if that makes sense. I don't know. I hope I didn't go too far off there. It's like,
I'm a Trekkie in sci-fi, so I totally went right there with an image, Cardassian or something, Oh, the reptilian. Wait.
Right. So for me, the life cycle of a butterfly was a visual representation of what we as human beings go through, but it's more, as human beings, we would not see ourselves or equate ourselves to being insects like to that extent, but we're like, to me, I've entertained the thought to say, why aren't we insects?
We're all connected somehow. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
It's fascinating. You mentioned that it's interesting how the life of a butterfly is very similar to our own. The life meaning its stages, right? So we have all of these stages.
Yes.
Yet,
very much so. Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yes.
And I speak on that in the extent that we believe that once we hit adulthood, from 18, 25 to 35, that we start changing and growing to some extent, that we call ourselves adult, and that's supposed to be a final complete version of ourselves from embryo to toddler to teenager to adult, and once you reach that adult, that's it. But I've entertained the idea to say no, that's not it at all, especially with a schizophrenic. We're still going through changes, and those changes take place within the brain, within the mind, within the consciousnesses of who we are. That and then if you can get to the point of where we are now in terms of awakening, I would then say, there's a level of completeness in that, because then you get it, then you realize, then you understand. You start to make a difference in a way where you care about the planet differently, you care about the people differently. You look to, you have more of a gratitude. You have a completely, you go from being selfish to self-aware. You know what I mean? And I think at the end of the day, that is the calling that most schizophrenics have, or people in the mental health field. And those are the callings that when we speak about calling, that is what it's all about. Being called to transform and change to the point where we heal the planet, as opposed to hurting it to the extent that we are doing now, that some of us don't even believe we even are involved in. So that's part of that awakening that goes in line with the calling. And again, part of that distinction between an incomplete metamorphosis versus a complete metamorphosis.
Exactly. I love that. Love it. After you talk about how the cycle of a butterfly is very similar to our own, you say, yet we would dare not see ourselves from that perspective. What would it mean to the establishment?
Yes.
What would it mean?
Is that not a profound question statement? What would it mean? Because it's basically, we would be turning the whole thing right side up, or upside down and right side up. We would completely be, changing that dynamics to the point where it's then where we bring more balance to the situation, where it's more healing. and it brings more credibility to who we are as awakening beings, on this spiritual journey, saying, no, this is not about your framework of an illness. This is there's something more to it that is more environmentally healthy for us. And if you allow us this chance, we could explain this to you a little bit better. But right now, a lot of us, and even myself, we struggle with being able to communicate and explain to, the caterpillars of the world where it makes sense to them. So,
yeah.
And then so then we do podcasts like this to try to, reach out to people in the meantime.
It's a fantastic way to reach out to people.
So I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being, a value member of our group. And you brought some wonderful light to this topic of schizophrenia, and starting on this journey at 29 years old and now being 50. What would you tell someone who is maybe on this journey?
Wow, that is a tough one right there, because there's no easy way, if you will, to tell somebody anything about their particular journey outside of sharing what I've gone through, my experience. So, like I've done in the group. And so it's not a matter of me advising someone to do a particular thing, or which would be kind of difficult too, because they have other people in their ears talking and telling them and saying things, this is the way it's supposed to go. And that goes back to that level of discernment. But I will tell you this. I remember at 29 years old, it was almost like a magical calling of some. It's still very hard for me to explain, and a lot of people don't believe it when I share it, but I came in contact with a book called Conversations with God. And that book is written by author Neil Donald Walsh. And how I came in contact with that book is my brother was visiting from college one day, and he just happened to have these collections of audiobooks that sat on his desk. And my wife picked it up and she saw it and she thought that the title was interesting. And it was audio tapes, and I think she might have listened to maybe one little snippet of it. And she was like, no, this is not for me, because it wasn't ideally the Christian point of view of understanding the God that was that she had grew up with. So she listened to like a snippet of it, and so she asked me then to return the audiobooks to my brother. Oh boy, why did she have to hand it to me to do that? Because curiosity.
Divinely directed, yes.
Yeah, curiosity got the better of me, and I was like, conversation with God, huh? Okay, all right, let me see what this is all about. So I happened to be driving home, and back then my car had, these were when we had audio cassettes in the cars. So I started playing this thing, and it was very striking and interesting to me. And it was about a guy having a dialogue with the God of his understanding. He had befallen some hard time, and he was very angry with God, and he wanted answers. He wanted to know what was happening in life that making his life so difficult and treacherous. And he could think of nobody else to go to but to vent and frustrate and have his beef with the big guy himself, the being out there that we label as God. And so he vented, and the way he vented was on paper dialogue, as he described it, that he was writing down his frustration. He was writing down in the middle of the night. He woke up and he was writing down all these questions that he had for God. And then, as he described it, a voiceless voice came to him and started giving him the answers, and basically said, so are you just venting, or you really want answers to these questions? And he looked around and he was like, who's talking? And so again, this is one of those schizophrenic moments. And he himself would not describe himself as being a schizophrenic, but here he was having a conversation with God, which is what most typical schizophrenics claim. They claim to be talking to God, or if not being God themselves, and that's a whole different topic right there. I can get into later on. But he had this conversation that went on for quite some time, to where he wrote, and that book, Conversation with God, and became a bestseller. And he wrote a couple of series of books that followed that. But I followed and listened to those books intently, to where that helped me through my transformation. That teaching, the experience that he had, made it clear for me to say that, oh, as much as the world was telling me that I was ill, my brain, something was wrong with my brain, and I had a disorder and I needed to take medication for life. Here, this book was saying, no, you're having a conversation with me. And since I can't talk to you directly, I'm going to use, this person, Neil Donald Walsh, to make things clear for you. And oh my goodness, things became very clear. So I listened to those tapes, that audio book intently, to the point where things.
Pick up your phone.
Yeah. So things became very. It took some time. It wasn't an overnight process. It took 5-10 years or so of just listening to the series of books that he would write along the way, and that till this day became a part of my growth, my transformation, my metamorphosis, my understanding, and so I could not really say to someone, in a few words, anything specific that would help them along in their journey. But I could, again, mention that book, that author. I could also mention my book, Schizophrenia, When the Mind, Body, and Spirit Go to War. It's one of those things where I love that question, because every day I run into and I see other schizophrenics, and I wish I could answer. I wish I could produce a result of that question that you asked me in a snap of my finger, but it's like it's impossible. And it's one of those things where I see other schizophrenics going through what they're going through, but I can't say or do anything specifically, to assist them in their transformation and their thing. And I got it, and I realized that this has to be a community effort. We all have to come to this new level of awareness, a new consciousness, if you will, through this podcast, through other people bringing forth these type of messages. It has to be a conscious level change, and not just an individual change, if you will. I don't know if I made myself clear in that, but that's
yes, because you don't want to help them unwrap their cocoon to get to their wings, because then they won't be able to fly. Yeah,
exactly. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. So your book is called Schizophrenia, When Mind, Body, and Spirit Goes to War. Mm-hmm. Is that on Amazon, or is it a book?
It's available on Amazon. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. We'll put a link to that in the description.
And I also have a website. It's we don't have the www. Well, I guess you can find it with the www stuff, but it's www.sza.life. So I have a website there that if anybody's interested, or they can go straight directly to Amazon and purchase it there. But the website sort of gives a lead into, the source material, and give a little background about myself and things of that nature. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your transformational journey to spirit. What an awesome transformation. What an awesome journey. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you for inviting me, and I love it. I appreciate it, and I'm hoping that maybe we can do this again, because
Absolutely.
This has been fun. This has been fun. I like this. So
This
thank
is
you again.
fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay.